Joining us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, Andrew DiCecco, Senior Draft Analyst, Pro Football Network contributor for InsideTheBirds.com. Joining us here to talk more NFL draft, get into some more information about the prospects and what the Eagles should do and more. Andrew, how you doing on this Saturday?
I'm doing well, Josh. Good to be with you.
I'm glad to have you on board. So before we get to any of the specific players, scenarios, all that stuff, I want to lay the groundwork with this question. When you're looking at these prospects, when it comes to, ranking them, evaluating them, what do you find is more important? Is it how they fit with the team and what the team's needs are? Or are you looking at it and saying, listen, there are some guys, no matter what team it is, they're going to be a very good NFL player?
That's a great start the evaluation process, which really starts around Thanksgiving, and I start watching film on a lot of these guys. I kind of liken it to, okay, this guy's a ball player. He's a fantastic player. A team's going to take him and then find a way to use him. I don't like to kind of base things off of need. I like to just go off the tape and what I see and evaluate it from there.
So now, for example, with a team like the Eagles, obviously, most people know who the top wide receivers are. But how many of those top receivers are actually what the team like the Eagles need?
The Eagles need help in various, right? So I think when you're looking at the receiver class, when you look at it in the terms of the first round, you're looking at Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb. I think Henry Ruggs would be probably the best fit right now. I think we can all agree on that. Justin Jefferson, he's a slot receiver, and a lot of the players on the Eagles right now can play slot receiver, so he might not be the ideal fit there. But also, you look at Denzel Mims; he's a good fit. Brandon Ayuk, he's a great fit. So they have needs. They need multiple receivers, and they need to come out of this draft with at least two, I would think.
So, what is the better scenario to get to maximize the ability to get those receivers? Is it staying at 21? Is it trading up? Is it trading back? If I swapped out Howie Roseman on draft night and I told you, Andrew, I'm going to put you in the GM driver's seat, what scenario do you feel like is going to be the best opportunity to maximize that? Because I think a lot of fans, they've been so hyper-focused on maybe those big three, Jeudy, Lamb, and Ruggs, and then a little bit Jefferson as well, that I think there's overlooked that there's a whole group of receivers after them that are pretty closely ranked.
Right. So the only way I would trade up is if you get past, if pick 14 is there and one of the big three receivers, Lamb, Jeudy, or Ruggs, are sitting there. That's the only way I consider, making an aggressive play to get up there and maybe get one of those guys. But you're looking at, there's a legitimate possibility that Justin Jefferson isn't there at 18, isn't there at 21. He could go as early as 18 to the Miami Dolphins. So I would probably stay put. And, instead of reaching for a receiver, I might look at the defensive side of the ball where you have a need and still have secondary needs. And I would look at Jalen Johnson, the corner from Utah, or possibly even Jeremy Chin, the versatile safety from Southern Illinois.
I know some mock drafts have Kenneth Murray as an option for the Eagles. Do you think that is a guy that makes sense for them?
Kenneth Murray's a solid player, but he's not as reactionary in coverage as you would like for a player that you're taking at 21. He's a fast-flowing run-and-hit linebacker, and his game is all speed and lateral agility. I actually like Patrick Queen from LSU a bit better than Kenneth Murray. And I had this talk with Seth Joyner for the past couple of weeks on our podcast, and we both don't see it. We don't see the Eagles taking a linebacker in the first round. The highest they've taken one is in the second round. I believe it was Quentin Caver in 2001. Matt McCoy in, I believe, 2005, and Michael Kendricks. So it's not likely, but either one of those players would significantly help the second level.
Andrew DiCecco joining me here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. You can follow him on Twitter at DiCecco NFL on Twitter to follow the NFL draft that comes here to 97.3 ESPN. Coverage begins Thursday night. Let's go back to the receivers for a minute, because I think that one of the things that gets talked about a lot, and I feel like my head's been spinning because of this, people get so bent out of shape about 40 times. And I try to explain to people that just because you can run a straight line fast doesn't mean that a player can play that same speed running a route. To me, Andrew, route running is way more important than straight line speed.
100%. I actually think the 40-yard dash is one of the most overblown testing measures in football. How often are you running in a straight line, and how often does that really, dictate whether the player can play football or not? You look at guys like Van Jefferson later, and he'll probably be a third-round prospect. Probably the second best route runner in the entire draft class, and he's not a blazer. Brandon Ayuk ran a 4.5. Off the top of my head, Laviska Shenault ran a high 4.5. That was mostly due to the core injury, but I always turn to the tape. I go to the film. What can the player do on tape? What's their play speed like? I'm not a big measure or a big testing guy in when I try to evaluate a player.
I'm glad you said that, because I feel like a lot of times people fall in love with guys running around in shorts and tank tops at these combines and these draft days. And I think there might be a blessing in disguise that some of these teams will not have to be forced to fall in love, whether it's the Eagles or any other team, with a guy just because he's running around and he physically looks good. I think this is an opportunity to force people to go back to the tape and see, okay, for example, KJ Hamler had trouble at times looking the ball into his hands before running, or that Brandon Ayuk was very good at breaking off press coverage and getting by guys on his routes, or the fact you mentioned Van Jefferson. Van's father played in the NFL and he's a coach in the NFL. So to me, those are much more valuable things to look at than 40 time, cone drill, things like that.
Yeah, 100%. Van Jefferson is arguably one of the most NFL-ready receivers right now, and he's an advanced route runner. He said, like you said, his father coaches in the NFL, has done so for a long time. Brandon Ayuk is another player you mentioned. He's a yak monster. He's not as polished as some of the other two guys, but he's a route salesman. He manipulates cornerbacks with his head fakes and everything, and he's terrific. He's like a running back with the ball in space. So you have to look at what the film tells you, not necessarily what the testing numbers indicate.
Who's a guy who's not going to be drafted in the first round, not named Van Jefferson, because you and I are both on the same page with him, but who's another guy that is going to be picked like second or third round, that if the Eagles have the opportunity to get him, that you would be, if you were in the room, pounding a table to say, if you don't take this guy, you're going to regret it?
Well, Courtney Davis is a guy I like in the third round, probably fourth round. He's a receiver from Texas A&M. He struggled with injuries for his first two seasons, but he's also a very advanced route runner, had a really good Senior Bowl. Then, looking a little bit further than that, I can take it a little bit deeper. There's going to be some speed threats that if you go the other route earlier in the draft, you can get some speed guys later. Darnell Mooney from Tulane, he's pretty much the same. He's in the same mold of KJ Hamler. He's a burner. And John Hightower from Boise State, I believe he averaged 18.5 yards per reception last season, and he was at the Shrine Bowl and performed well there. And Isaiah Coulter, the wide receiver from Rhode Island, he ran a 4.45 at the NFL Combine, 6'2", 198. A lot of guys are really high on his upside, and I think he's a guy that could be in play late day 2, maybe early day 3.
Let's flip it over to the defense, because I know a lot of people out there are looking at the defenders, not just for the Eagles, but for a lot of teams. And at cornerback, I know that I feel like there's a general consensus. It's Jeff Okudah, it's C.J. Henderson at the top. But how do you differentiate the next group of guys, whether it's A.J. Terrell, Trayvon Diggs, Christian Fulton, Jalen Johnson? How do you differentiate those guys after the top two?
Well, when I'm watching film on those guys, I look to see how they handle a myriad of different receivers. I look to see how they played against stiffer competition. And I try to take that and project to what they can amount to at the NFL level. And my third cornerback is Jalen Johnson, the corner from Utah. Rangy guy, 6 foot, 198 pounds. He plays. They call him a boundary bully on the outside. And I think when you look at what the Eagles have, they have a lot of corners that are about 5'10", they go 5'10", 5'11". You really need to get some size there for Marquand Manuel to work with. I just love the skill set that Jalen has. He just fits that toughness mold and that Seattle Seahawk, if you can imagine that, the Seattle Seahawks cornerbacks of old. I kind of see a lot of that in him.
How much do you have to factor in that some of these guys who played on great defenses, a team like Alabama and some of the others, Utah with Johnson was a very good defense in the Pac-12 for all intents and purposes this past year. How do you differentiate the fact that a guy might be on a very good defense to the fact that a guy may have had benefited from being on that defense?
Yeah, I think you have to look at the individual matchups, right? So, if you're a pass rusher, I'm going to look and see how they handle how they handle their individual matchups against the offensive line. And when I look at, like, let's say a Trayvon Diggs, like you mentioned, I'm looking to see how he held his own on the island there, or if he's able to kind of move around and take on some of these different tasks, wear a lot of hats in the slot or things of that nature. So I try to look at the individual matchup and base it off of that.
So, like, give me an example of a guy that maybe benefited too much, like a cornerback who, because he was on a team, maybe had a good pass rush, or a team that had another very good cornerback. Is there a guy who is a cornerback that maybe is a little buyer beware?
Yeah, I would probably say Christian Fulton right now, the corner from LSU. He's the guy that he started this whole process, and he was one of the guys that was considered to be a top 5 corner. And he still is a top 5 corner, but many were mentioning him in the top 3. And you start to see some of the tape. He's solid. He's a solid player, but he's not as fluid as some of these other guys. He's kind of, I guess he'll project as a starter, but he had the Kalavan Chasins and that vaunted LSU defense. So I think that he's a guy that might slide down into the first round and get bypassed by some of the guys like the Jeff Gladneys and the Jalen Johnsons and players like that.
Whenever it comes to the draft, Andrew, I always love trying to find, because I watch a lot of college football myself. I probably watch more college football than I do NFL, just selfishly. But one of the guys I loved watching this past year, but I don't really know what his position is in the NFL, is Troy Dye of Oregon. Is he a linebacker? Is he a safety? Is he a hybrid? I'm not 100% sure what he is, because the only thing I know about him specifically was the guy was a playmaker. He was all over the field. He seemed to be in every big play for Oregon this past year. He's a really good instinctive guy in my eyes. But what does he actually play at the NFL level?
I think he plays Mike linebacker at the next level. Like we were saying earlier, you take guys that are great athletes and you find a way to use them. That's on the defensive coaches to find a way to use Troy Dye, because he can do so many different things for defense. And when you're looking at defenders as a whole, positionless players are kind of like the new wave of the way the NFL defenses are trending. So you want those kind of hybrid guys that you can move around as versatile chess pieces, like Troy Dye, like even as a safety, Jeremy Chin, where you can move him at linebacker, overhang safety, and even cover in the slot. So I think that you take those guys and you find a way to use them.
Is Troy Dye a guy that makes sense for the Eagles to maybe get in maybe like the 3rd round?
Yeah, I think Troy Dye would fall in that same realm as Logan Wilson from Wyoming and Jordan Brooks from Texas Tech, Akeem Davis Gaither from Appalachian State as well. Those are those linebackers that in that 3rd round range that you're gonna kind of see, and they all have very kind of similar skill sets in that they're versatile linebackers. They can be 3-down players, but they can also move around, and they have that coverage acumen that you're looking for.
Andrew, it wouldn't be a draft conversation before I let you go without asking you about quarterbacks. Obviously, the Eagles don't need a quarterback, but there's been a ton of talk about Tua and Herbert and Jordan Love and all these guys. So I got 2 specific questions. First of all, with Tua Tagovailoa, how much do you look at the injuries, and how much do the injuries scare you off versus saying, look, I don't care about the ankles. The hip was a freak situation. This guy has got incredible potential. So how do you differentiate the injury history with the potential?
Well, I had to mull this over when I was doing my mock draft earlier this week, and he's a guy he's my favorite quarterback in the draft, Tua. But if you're the Miami Dolphins and you have that 5th pick, those durability concerns are there, and there's the medical red flags it's going to weigh heavily into their decision. So I'm going to go with the guy like Justin Herbert, who has a clean bill of health and plenty of upside as well. He's got the prototypical size at 6'6", gets rid of the ball fast, has that big arm. Tua is going to be a fantastic player, but there's always going to be that worry there that is this going to be a sign of things to come with him? Is this going to? And when you're looking at the 5th overall pick there, that's a hefty investment when weighing the concerns.
And speaking of concerns, Jordan Love is a guy that, listen, I understand he's got a phenomenal arm. He's phenomenally talented, but I have trouble getting around the fact that guy had so many bad decisions and interceptions. And I keep hearing, oh, well, he lost all these starters from the year before. But, Andrew, am I wrong to look at Jordan Love and say, listen, I don't care who's around you. You still got to make good decisions. And to me, quarterback position is all about decision making.
Yes, you're not wrong in that evaluation, because the thing is with Jordan Love is, yeah, you can make those excuses. He lost a lot of talent that left that building. But if you're looked at as an NFL prospect, you need to be able to kind of make the guys around you better, and that's not something he necessarily did last season. He was very erratic with his throws. He forced a lot of passes. One thing you like to see with quarterbacks is you like to see him take chances and not always be safe, but you got to make smart, calculated decisions with the football, and that's why he's such a polarizing player in the first round here. You're seeing that he can go anywhere in the top 15, or he could slide to the back of the first round and to potentially to the Green Bay Packers. He's all over the board there, and it's because of the erratic decisions that he's made and the up and down play style. I think there's some concern there from NFL teams.
Great stuff from Andrew DiCecco here on 97.3 ESPN. Again, check him out on Twitter at @DiCecco NFL, senior draft analyst for Pro Football Network, contributor for InsideTheBirds.com. And then, Andrew, plug the podcast.
Oh, man. So every Tuesday, Seth Joyner and I record the Seth Joyner podcast. Last week, we were joined by Charles Barkley. This week, we're going to be joined by the Footwork King. He's going to shed some light on his training. He's trained CeeDee Lamb and Darius Slade, a number of NFL players. So it's going to be some great conversation. Those podcasts drop every Wednesday, so definitely check that out.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to touching base with you again in the near future. Obviously, the draft is coming right at us next week. Again, Andrew, appreciate your time today. And as all guests, Andrew joined us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.
Anytime, Josh. Take care.